The Wisp, Chapter 28. Courtney wasn't alone. She'd brought Muscle, a large, serious-looking man in a dark suit. She rushed at Bara. Colin took hold of her hand and pulled. They ran down the nearest aisle. As they rounded the end, Bara looked behind to see how close Courtney was in pursuit. Strange, Courtney and her Muscle weren't following. Bara and Colin skidded to a stop in front of the ancient elevator. Colin pushed the button insistently. He needn't have. It was just arriving. It jerked loudly to a stop, and a rusty door slid open with complaint. Oh my God, there are two of them. From the elevator stepped the identical twin to the man who'd come with Courtney. Without hesitation, he took each of their collars in his gargantuan hands. Bara and Colin struggled in his grip, but with no success. He led/carried them back to where Courtney calmly waited. Letting go none too gently, he shoved them at the study carrel. He then stood protectively next to Courtney. His twins stood on the other side. Colin and Bara were blocked from fleeing. Where had Courtney found these men? 1-800-DIALAGOON? For certain they weren't residents of Windfall. These men Bara would have remembered seeing. They wore all black and had identical cookie-cutter hair, short, light brown, and parted on the side. Their eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. Colin was as tall, but he didn't come close to either's bulk, a bamboo among oaks. They were at least a foot taller than Courtney. They showed no emotion, but a warning was clearly given. We can and will hurt you. Courtney wore her customary pink, a long coat and a silk scarf. Underneath, no doubt, was the metal locket containing the amber. Despite her fine clothes, she seemed worn and tired. She didn't look bad. Courtney was far too beautiful to actually look bad, but she definitely didn't look her best. She wore no makeup, her hair was unstyled, pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her blue eyes were rimmed with bruises of fatigue. Black magic must be tiring, Bara thought ruefully. Courtney took a step forward and made to touch Bara, but Colin positioned his body between the two, preventing any physical contact. Courtney stepped back again. You need to come home, she said in a too sweet voice. Your father's very worried. He has the entire sheriff's office looking for you. What's with these guys, then? Colin asked. Since when do cops come in matching pairs? Courtney narrowed her eyes and studied him. Her mouth formed a small smile. At first Colin flushed, but then he gathered his courage and met her gaze. He was defiant. Maybe you should come with us, too, she said. Still so sweet, sweet as honey, thick as tar. Colin straightened his normally bent shoulders and came to his full height, which under other circumstances would have been impressive. We aren't going anywhere with you. There was a low rumble. The sound had come from one of the two men. They had stood like zombies Courtney had conjured to do her bidding, but now tree-trunk arms which had been folded across barrel chests were hanging freely, fists clenched. Neither man would have had a problem folding Colin up like an ironing board, and with as much ease, toting him out of the library. One thing was certain, they were definitely outmatched. Bara felt the same defiance as Colin, but with the physical strength of the men, not to mention Courtney's powers, it would have been like doing battle with a jet fighter and two tanks armed only with a well-meaning garden rake. And wasn't that what they needed anyway, to get Courtney on her own, to somehow get the locket from her neck? They had the dagger. Once the goons were gone, they might be able to use it. Colin, with more courage than sense, stepped forward, ready to challenge the world. Bara put out an arm to stop him. She shot him a meaningful look. Her hand rested on the dagger in his inner pocket. I think we should go. We need to talk this out with my stepmother, alone. We can do that back at my dad's. Colin felt the blade next to his torso. He understood. Trying not to grow suspicion, he shot the Muscle one last threatening look. Are you sure? Bara nodded and turned to her stepmother. We'll go with you. One of the men motioned that they should start walking. Bara and Colin did as he wanted. Courtney and her entourage followed. They left the stacks and started up the stairs. The rungs creaked from the strain, threatening to give way under the mass of the men. Bara was more than a little relieved when they reached the top and entered the foyer. They passed an empty front desk. No Miss Corey. Where had the librarian gone? Bara shrugged. It hardly mattered now. One of the men opened a door and waited for everyone to pass through. The sun was completely up, but thick clouds shut out most of the light. Parked by the doors was a black SUV with tinted windows into which they were ushered without protest. It seemed Courtney hadn't hired twins, but triplets. Another giant sat in the driver's seat. How many of them were there? Bara shivered at the thought of an army of thickly muscled zombies existing just to do her stepmother's bidding. Courtney joined the driver in the front seat. Bara and Colin were sandwiched between the other two in the back. It was a tight fit, to say the least. As the SUV pulled away from the library, Bara looked back. Amy hadn't returned from the food run. Unless Amy saw them get into the car and drive away, she'd never know what had happened. There may have been a flash of pink, Amy's coat, disappear behind a bush. Perhaps Bara had seen Amy, perhaps it was only wishful thinking. The SUV drove out of the square and joined the light morning traffic of Windfall Boulevard. Bara sat back on the leather seat to wait out the drive. Moving like an oil spill on a woodland pond, the shiny black car made its way through the autumn leaves and past the mansions of the Grand Oak district. The Wisp is published on Amazon.com. Also available on Amazon is Monsters, Real and Imagined, Tragic, Frightening, and Funny, All Too Brief, a collection of short stories and poetry. Strays, a collection of short stories and philosophical love poems, and Tattoo, Calling All Soldiers Home, a collection of poems in brevity.